Welcome to the bonus show. The latest talking point that many on the right, including Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, are seizing on is that inflation is Joe Biden's fault, specifically because of the COVID stimulus package that Biden did. The way that this basically developed was they wanted to blame Biden for inflation, and many of us connected to reality by something anchored, tethered to the real world, said, well, there's inflation globally, and some countries it's even higher than in the US and some is lower. What exactly did Biden do? And they go, well, each of those countries has its own reason for inflation, but in the US it's because of Joe Biden's stimulus package, to which we pointed out Trump did 2 of those stimulus packages. So wouldn't he be doubly to blame, which they just ignore? But the solution that DeSantis is offering is to give money to people in Florida, $450 for each child in your care, and the money will come from the COVID-19 relief funds. So the solution in Florida, per DeSantis, is to give people money, which is what Joe Biden did. But it's not just any money that they will give them. It's the money allocated from the COVID stimulus. This is, I mean, these are not serious people.
Right. I mean, it seems like a contradiction. However, it's not a contradiction if you can point out a distinction between the two things. And in one of these instances, it's a Democratic administration that they're talking about. In another one, it's a Republican administration. So I think that's the difference that they'll point out to us. But yeah, it's obvious that, I mean, this isn't going to help the situation overall macroeconomically. I think maybe the idea is you give people who are struggling the most and need the money the most a little extra money in their pocket, a few $100s, so that they can survive, so that they can put fuel in the tank, so that they can put food on the table. But it's obvious that you can't make the point that it's Biden's stimulus package and the stimmy checks, the unemployment benefits that put us in this situation, and then say, okay, well, we're going to resolve it by giving people more money. There's obviously hypocrisy there.
It doesn't make any sense. And I was recently looking at a map of inflation rates by country in 2022. It's really not that high in the United States compared to a bunch of these other countries with outrageous inflation. Now, people will say, well, but David, you can't compare the U.S. to Venezuela. It's like, no, that's not what I'm suggesting at all. But if you just look around the world, you see that there are a whole bunch of countries, including countries in Europe, where inflation has been 11%, 12%, 14%. There's even a few places where it's been higher than that. So it's not about the U.S. is superlative in any particular way. This is just a global issue. And sure, countries can deal with it differently, but giving people money, DeSantis is proving that giving people money is a reaction to inflation, not necessarily the cause of it. But he's sort of saying like, well, it's the cause and the solution.
Right. And everyone has their own person or entity to blame. Some people like to blame Biden. Some people like to blame Trump.
Yeah.
Some people like to blame Russia. I think it's obviously all of these different factors. Everything plays into it. But the main thing is the supply shock that we had from coronavirus and how the Fed responded to it. There was this idea that inflation was going to be transitory, so there wasn't an immediate need to raise interest rates in order to deal with it. It turned out that the inflation wasn't so transitory. The supply issues continued. And so the Federal Reserve probably should have increased interest rates going back quite a few months earlier than they did start in about March. And also they should have stopped buying back bonds earlier than they did. So obviously hindsight's 2020 with a lot of this stuff. You can look back and say we should have done this better, this better. I think going forward, we're probably in a decent position right now. It does seem like inflation has peaked. If it got any worse, then that would be concerning, obviously, because you start talking about a potential wage price spiral where companies have to start paying their employees more to allow them to afford the higher cost of living, which means the companies have to start charging higher prices to consumers.
Yes.
And everything just kind of gets out of control. And once you start getting to 10% inflation, 11% inflation, 12%, it's really, really bad. I don't think we're going to get there. And we'll know for sure over these next few months when we see the new CPI data and the direction things are heading.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I know that we will get July numbers in August. Looking at the calendar,
I think it's the middle of the month.
If it's the second, third, sometimes like last month it was the 12th, which I think was or this month I guess it was the 12th, which was that was a Friday. No, the 12th was a Tuesday. So I think sometime between the 9th and 16th of August, we'll get the July numbers. I would be shocked, Pat, if inflation is not down significantly because of one very specific indicator. Gas prices are going down so quickly, down from 502 now to around 430. That's like 70, it's about 70 cents. We're now talking about 12-ish%. So many things. So there's two reasons why I think that that's a signal. Number one, there's a lot of things that depend on gas prices. So the cost of a lot of the things we buy depend on how much it costs to transport them to the place where we buy them. So that has to do with gas prices. So that's one reason. The other reason is these things tend to move in tandem. So it's very hard to imagine that inflation has tracked gas prices for a while. If that is the case continuing on, then it just makes sense that inflation is going to be down. So I would be shocked if we don't have a very good number in mid-August, and hopefully the markets will react positively to that.
Yeah, hopefully we go from 9.1% inflation to something like 8.5%
No,
and a
I
little
think we
bit
could go
further
into
down.
high sevens or even mid seven. I think it's going to be a notable decline. That's my completely meaningless amateur prediction.
Well, yeah, even the economists who study this stuff day in, day out, they've been
Mhm.
getting the numbers wrong by 0.2%, 0.3%. So it's hard to know exactly, but
Yeah.
definitely with fuel prices heading down, you'd have to expect inflation to be going down overall. And then there's also some things like the car market seems to be cooling off a little bit. Real
Yes.
estate's cooling off just a little bit, in part because we're raising interest rates, and so there's less of an urgency to want to buy things and to loan out money. So there's that aspect to it, but you just kind of have to sit back and wait because we never know these things for sure.
Indeed. And we are going to be following it more closely than you can imagine, folks. That's for sure. And it's a shame. Okay. Let's talk about clear backpacks. Now, some Republicans have suggested eliminating doors, arming teachers, ballistic blankets, and all these different things to deal with school shootings. The Dallas Independent School District, which is the second largest school district in Texas, they are going to require students to use only clear or mesh backpacks. And the idea, obviously, is if you can see into the backpack from the outside, you can make sure that there's no prohibited belongings like guns. It'll make it faster for students to get in because not every backpack is going to have to be opened. And there still may be bag searches at the discretion of staff. You could imagine, well, if you've got a sweatshirt in there, you could wrap a handgun in a sweatshirt and then put it in the clear backpack or whatever. Quite dystopian is the situation. So, couple different things. There's privacy questions, right? What if you have hygiene items, tampons, medications, things like that? You can have a small, non-clear pouch within the backpack. It's becoming sort of like TSA. I mean, you're basically doing like, well, there's no liquids and all this stuff. This is very, very dark stuff that's going on. I don't know any other way to interpret this.
Yeah, and then you can also make the case that this wouldn't have stopped the mass shooting in Uvalde because it's not like the shooter was a student there. Although there's complications with that argument because sometimes you can say, well, yeah, it wouldn't have solved that particular shooting. It wouldn't have prevented
Right.
that one. But then there's other ones that maybe we haven't foreseen or other specific events that have happened where it would have stopped the shooting. So there is that case to be made. But like viewing this as any sort of solution to me just doesn't make sense.
No.
I think they actually were on the right track when it came to the door issue more than they were with the clear backpack thing, just looking at what caused the Uvalde shooting and how they could have prevented that one.
Yeah, I mean, it makes marginally more sense, even though really what we need to deal with is the guns. It's at least less overtly dystopian, although still setting up a sort of like, so you're either way, you're kind of turning the school into sort of like an airport or a concert venue type thing.
Yeah, and it's difficult because people are only travel every now and then. Typically, people only go to a concert every now and then, so maybe they're used to dealing with that inconvenience for that sort of setting. But with school, you're going there every day as a child or a teacher, and you have to worry about if it's going to be traumatic for the kids, if they're going to be worried about a school shooting taking place because they're constantly being monitored and their backpacks are exposed and all this stuff. And
Right.
maybe it presents itself as more of a statistical issue than it actually is, because we do know that school shootings are quite statistically rare.
Yeah.
If you're a student at a school, you're very unlikely to die from a mass shooting. But just given increased security, maybe metal detectors, locked doors, clear backpacks, all these different things. I would imagine that maybe like the psychological effects of that for children could be worse than any benefit you get from having these different items.
I had this kind of thing the other day where, I mean, I'm not going to have to make any decisions about schooling for my daughter for a while, but I was just thinking the other day, and I started going down this path of like, okay, well, I mean, I know that it's statistically rare, but like, shouldn't I still do everything I can to reduce that number even more if it's possible? And immediately you start thinking about charter and private schools, right? And this is exactly the problem. This is how public schools get even worse. And I'm a public school guy and a big advocate of it, but I start going, there's like no shootings I mean, just I'm not saying this is what I would do, but like even though Jews are highly targeted by religious hate, there's security at private Jewish schools where like there's no shootings. Is that the safest place? And so I understand how people start going down these thought processes, which just make the problem worse, actually.
Right. And it's like one thing to do a few different things to make your child a little bit more safe, right? Maybe the clear backpack wouldn't help your own child specifically, but there's like other things that maybe you feel can protect them. I know sometimes there's this idea of like having, I don't know, is it backpacks that are made out of Kevlar or whatever else?
I thought it was like
That can use as a
blankets of
shield.
some kind or something. I don't remember now. Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, I think little things like that are one thing, but there can definitely be overreactions, and obviously also these school shootings can be anomalous events anyway. So like
Right.
just because maybe they don't happen in a Jewish school with security, that doesn't mean that potentially it couldn't be the next target for one.
Absolutely. When you're
Um,
talking about small numbers anyway, everything is sort of an outlier in a sense.
right. So overall, do you think this clear backpack idea is a good one, or would you scratch this from your agenda?
I mean, I think we need to deal with the guns. Like, is it to
Mhm.
some degree an idea that might be useful in dissuading people from even trying to bring a gun? Maybe, but like, I feel like we're not doing the most obvious thing first, which is dealing with the guns.
Yeah, it's just like when we talk about mental health. There's definitely things we can do on the mental health front, but we shouldn't use that as a distraction
Correct.
from the real issue at hand, which is we need more gun regulation. There are some simple things that we can do,
Yep.
especially when it comes to 18 to 21-year-olds and the easy access they have to semi-automatic weapons in a lot of these states.
100%. So let us know your thoughts. I know a lot of people in the audience have school age kids. Let us know if the schools your kids go to are doing anything. This is kind of funny. One of the revelations that was interesting from the January 6th committee hearings was this video of Republican Senator Josh Hawley quite literally running away from the January 6th rioters. And he was caught with some papers just kind of sprinting out of the Capitol on January 6th. And he was one of the loudest Senate voices who was saying, oh, there are irregularities and we've got to object to this and that. And we got to change all these different things and send things back to the states. And then when the rioters came in, who were supposedly on his side in a sense, he ran out there just like all of them. So Missouri Democrats are now doing, I don't want to call it satirical, but it's sort of like poking fun at him with something called a Hawlin Hawley virtual 5K race. Now, the race itself doesn't really matter, and it's a virtual race anyway. People just run on their own. It's a fundraiser. Now, I have to tell you, Pat, I don't blame Hawley for running the hell out of there. I would have done the same thing. And in fact, when people train you for what to do in these sorts of situations, the most common thing is if you can safely just get away from the incident, get away from the incident, right? They're not encouraging people to be heroes or to do anything. I would do it if it was possible. Everybody I know would say, I would, if this started, if I can safely get the hell out of there, I get the hell out of there. I think the hypocrisy is that, number one, the rioters were at least ostensibly on the side of Hawley, and yet they wanted blood, and maybe they weren't going to ask questions or figure out who is this exactly. We're just going for whoever we can get. That's number one. And then also number two, he was part of the movement that instigated the riots to begin with, and then he runs the hell out of it. He's just a pathetic guy.
Right. Like the average Trump supporter, especially back then, wouldn't even know who Josh Hawley was. He
Right.
wasn't really a national figure until January 6th. So if they saw that he was a member of Congress, they probably would have just assumed the worst and gone after him. So I do kind of understand the running away thing. But then when you match that with him giving that power fist to the supporters
Yeah.
right before all the events took place. And then even after the insurrection, he was the one that kept the electoral vote counting going into the night, because he decided to, even after all of that, object to one of the states. And he kept the congressmen and senators there for like an extra few hours. They were counting votes until like 2 or 3 in the morning. So I do think this is probably good politics, right? I mean, it would be better if it was an actual in-person race. I don't know why you have to do it virtually, because I think you could definitely raise a lot more money and have this be more of a troll type event if you actually did it in person.
Yeah.
But I do like Democrats playing this sort of game, because it seems like the type of thing that Republicans would do.
Yeah, I think we should be ridiculing ridiculous people, right? And when you inspire this and then you give them the fist, the fist in the air, and then you run away, like you should be ridiculed. And we should also recognize that this is a much bigger issue and all of the other things that we've sort of been talking about. But I do like seeing Democrats on the offensive generally, like you're saying, a virtual 5K. It's basically just like send $25 and then run when you want or don't. Nobody's really going to check. I think that, visually it would be more compelling if there was a real 5K of some kind. But I mean, it goes back to the Gavin Newsom idea of Democrats just need to be playing offense. I don't know that this 5K itself is really the offense we're talking about, but Democrats need to be on the offensive.
But I like using the tactic. I think we should use a bunch of these different things. Like
Sure.
John Fetterman's been doing a great job at this in Pennsylvania. Like he flew that helicopter with the banner, "Welcome home to New Jersey, Dr. Oz," trolling the idea that Dr. Oz isn't really from Pennsylvania. So that was smart. And he's been doing great with the advertising that he's been doing in Pennsylvania as well. So it's what the right wing does. You might as well just try it out and see if it works for you. I don't know if it'll have the exact same effect, but it should do pretty good.
Let's see what the fundraising dollars are. As a quick reminder, tomorrow night is our next David Pakman Show Town Hall, Tuesday, July 26th, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. You can call in via Discord at davidpakman.com/Discord. And then you can watch live on the Pakman Live YouTube channel, youtube.com/Pakman Live. So we'll see everybody tomorrow on the show. Oh, one quick thing. We have sort of like fixed to some degree the podcast issue that we've been having. Couple of notes. One, there is a new feed address, which if you log in on the website, the page that first comes up, also called the podcast and archive page, will give you the info for that new feed. And there may be a more sophisticated update coming in the next few weeks or couple of months. So we'll keep you posted, but hopefully everything back up and running. I know many of you experienced no issues last week. It only affected some people, but some of you did. And it should be fixed. More info on that soon.